All right, welcome everyone to this Pig Channel webinar today. This Pig Channel webinar is presented to you today by Precision Vet Services and PremierSHP. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Prices. I'm a vet with Precision Vet Services here in Alberta. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. First of all, a huge thank you to our key sponsors, our featured sponsors for today, which is Innovate Technologies and Zoetis. Really appreciate their sponsorship. Also, if you have any questions during this presentation, go to the bottom of your screen and there's a Q&A button that you can click on and type in your questions. And we'll get to them a couple after the first presentation and then more at the end. So please stay till the end and listen to all our questions and answers. Feel free to type those in at any time. Our first presentation today will be by Dr. Cordell Young. Cordell is a vet and a partner with Precision Vet Services. He always brings great ideas, lots of energy, and a focus on kind of solid sound systems for our business and for all the producers we work with. So with that, let's welcome Cordell. He is presenting on the art of getting things done using checklists in swine production.
Okay, well, thanks for joining on today, everybody. One of my more passionate things is to-do lists and checklists, and sometimes I get lost in them. But that's kind of the purpose of today's presentation. After I took a read through, a coach of mine recommended I read through the Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. So a lot of what we'll talk about today is simply in the application of checklists. And as I was reading the book, I was thinking of different ways that it applies to my personal life, but also practice. And it was just glaring at me how actually it has a real on-the-ground application in pig production. I guess the value proposition for kind of what checklists can bring to swine production and just general management and efficiency. One of the biggest concepts that was brought in the book and of making checklists is to help us apply the things that we already know correctly and consistently. And so that's just inherently built into checklists. The things on checklists, we usually made those checklists, so we know them obviously, but we just set them up as little reminders so that we get it right every time. Having checklists will also help establish processes and systems that are simple but yet complete. And I think that's where maybe the most work needs to go into making a checklist to keep it simple yet complete and cover off the biggest bases. Maximizing the staff in the barn and their capabilities and their reach. If we can get simple processes taken care of efficiently and effectively, all of a sudden, from the animal health perspective, I'm interested in that because it allows our staff and our managers in barns to focus more on pig health, which is always a challenge. Ensure the efficiency and training of new and replacement staff. One of the things that we see in almost every industry as we reach an impending societal collapse is a labor shortage. And certainly swine has seen this for many years. And so we have a turnover of staff often. Checklists allow us to keep procedures simple, and those are the most well suited to people that are just learning the game and just coming into their positions. One of the big ones we'll talk about is finding efficiencies of preparation. I think that has huge application in pig barns, and even decentralizing decision-making from management to staff. If the staff are properly maybe trained or understand thoroughly a checklist, it helps them to make decisions right in the moment that free up time in management in certain situations. Really, when we think of many different fields, and the swine field is one of them, this is the idea presented in the book, is the problem of extreme complexity. We deal in swine barns in systems that are incredibly complex, and we are pushing, because of low margins and because of the marketplace, we have to push our production as hard as we can to stay in the game. But that means that we build in extreme complexity. And well, with new things like Chat GTP and all this AI stuff coming out, there's more and more and more data available to us all the time, and it just actually makes things more complex. And it leads to ineptitude and negligence almost on our part, because we cannot keep up. And the things that we do are super specialized. A very good nursery manager may not necessarily be a very good farrowing manager, because those are each specialized areas. In the book, it says that they're referencing the medical field. The author states there's 13,000 ways to die. That is extreme complexity. And so really, it's trying to nail down and simplify processes that can accomplish the most in kind of the fewest steps or with the fewest resources. And I should have introduced the book a little bit more. It was written on the premise it's a surgeon that was evaluating the processes that they go through to try and do their job better and have less mortalities in the surgery suites and less infection rates. Where he found his answers is actually in the aviation field, and he applied what he learned there to the medical field, which are both passions of mine. So we have a couple of examples. There's a stab wound surgery. Somebody came into this doctor's surgery suite, and they knew that he was stabbed, and they started doing all these procedures and taking to surgery, but they forgot to ask what the patient was stabbed with, because it wasn't on a checklist. And that was the moment that keyed on the author to look into this whole issue. A simple detail got missed, and it just about cost that patient his life. And it could have been prevented. The Boeing 299 bomber, just for a bit of history, if any of you like that, way back in the I think it was the mid-1900s, Boeing came with one of their first and most advanced bombers, the 299, and they were presenting it to the U.S. government because they wanted to get the contract. And it was state of the art. They had their most skilled and timed out pilot flying the day of this demonstration, and sure enough, that plane crashed, killed the crew on the aircraft, tragically. And what did Boeing do with it? Boeing didn't say, we need to make a simpler aircraft. They said, our very most talented people were running this airplane. We need to make the processes simple for them. And that's where the checklist began. It's such a cool backstory. And so there are threads of that throughout this. Heart attacks and needing treatment within 30 minutes. The mortality rates are much less if a heart attack can be treated within 30 minutes of arrival to an emerge center. And so there need to be rigorous and effective checklists in place for this to become a reality. So meanwhile, in aviation, this is just an example of all the checklists that happen during a flight in a plane that I actually routinely fly. I got my pilot's license last May, and I've been flying a little bit ever since. But you can see here, every checklist, the before start and these highlighted in dark blue, these are all the checklists that I do between when I start the engine and when I take off. And because I've completed the checklist, I do it every time I read out every point to myself, even if I'm the only one flying. Brakes are set, carb heat's off, mixture's full rich, master switch is on, fuel pump is on. I go through that and say it to myself. And by the time I take off, I'm confident that everything has been done right for me to take off and fly safely. And that's the essence of a checklist, is to be able to know with confidence that everything that I know to do has been done. So one of the examples that I thought was so compelling from the book is central line infections. These are a line that are placed into the heart of critically ill patients. 11% of these procedures had infections at the John Hopkins University. And the surgeon Atul Gawande took this idea from aviation and applied it here on central lines and made a 5-point checklist. Wash your hands with soap, clean the patient's skin with antiseptic, use sterile drapes, wear new gloves, hat, gown, and mask, and apply a sterile dressing over the insertion site. None of these points come as a surprise that they need to be done before a central line is placed into the heart of a patient. But to their surprise, almost 30% of the procedures, there was at least one of these items that was forgotten. And it's only a 5-point checklist. And so I think it illustrates how important it is to just have the simple things laid out and done every time. When they applied the checklist, infections fell to 0%. They only had 2 cases in 18 months. And they prevented 45 infections, 8 deaths, and $2 million in healthcare costs. Incredible. The next one is soap in Pakistan. 1 in 10 children died before the age of 5 because of diarrhea and respiratory infections. And that's just some of the conditions that are there, unfortunately. And so a company went in, I think it was Procter & Gamble, went in and did a checklist that really just changes the behavior on these people in the areas where they were doing the studies. Again, simple checklist. This one's, well, 3, but really 5 points. Wash your bodies once daily. Wash your hands after defecating and after wiping an infant. And wash your hands before eating and feeding others. And they had different soaps with some different medications in them. And what they found is the medications, or some of the anti-infectives, I'll call them, didn't have any effect, because it was just the fact that they were doing the checklist that made made the difference. And what we can see, diarrhea stopped or it dropped, I should say, 52%. Pneumonia fell 48%. Basically cut the cases in half. And what did it do? They made a point in that study, and this is important for when we make checklists. They made soap available to the groups that they were testing, and that they made do the checklist. That's such a key part when we make checklists in the barn, is that we don't have a to-do item that can't be done or that isn't readily available. And in making the checklist so that each point can be done very quickly and very effectively, there's a lot of background work that can make that important. And then it's also changing our behavior. Interestingly, it made soap use more systematic, even in people that couldn't read. And so it didn't matter. It was just kind of that changing behavior that was important. And then lastly, the final kind of task of Dr. Gawande was to make a World Health Organization surgery checklist that they could use anywhere. And they had 8 hospitals from Seattle, and Toronto, which were the highest in the world, to Togo, which was the lowest in the world. And interestingly, when they implemented the checklist, it's a 19-step checklist that they came up with. It had a similar effect in the highest ranking and the lowest ranking hospitals. Incredible application. Major complications across the board were down basically a third, death down 46%, and infections down about 50% as well. Yeah, so this checklist that I'm talking about, this was kind of the final product of what Dr. Gawande was working on, and I hope it's not too blurry. They broke it up into 3 different 9 and 10 point checklists, or I guess the last one isn't. They kept them short, they kept them precise. One example is this right before the skin incision. I like to point out this point here. Confirm all team members have introduced themselves by name and role. Who would have thought that was such an important thing to put on a checklist? But in the emergency rooms or in the surgery suites, they are, when everybody knows everybody else, they work better as a team. And that's an example of where we can build into our checklists stuff that goes far beyond the actual task that needs done. It just takes thought and application in your particular scenario. Now, you're going to come at me and say, well, there's all kinds of checklists. You can make checklists of checklists, and you can get inundated and never get the work done. And things like focus on the paperwork or focus on the pig and just get the job done. Or often people will build a checklist, especially a protocol, and never use it again. Great. Why did we waste our time? And then it's one other weakness of checklists is to complete the checklist to the letter, but not completely. For example, to have somebody doing a checklist in a nursery room preparation, and we'll go through this example later, and you say, make sure there's feed in the feeder, but there's only 1 kernel in the feeder. That could be checked off as complete, even though there's one pellet. Whereas it would be better to put the feeder is full up to the bottom of the dropper type of thing. We don't want to add extra work. We want to become more efficient and more productive. And so we also need to make sure that the people that make the checklist will follow them and that they're compelled to because they see value. And we'll go through some of these details and some of the ways to get around all of this. So some of the tips that are there for making a good checklist: understand the style of checklist that you're doing, like a read and do. So it's almost like a to-do list in that case, or a do and confirm, where this task is done, and then you read off, that's done, that's done, that's done, that's done, that's done. And then you know that the checklist is complete. When I'm going through my airplane preparation for taking off, it's more of a read do. I read it and I do it. I read it and I do it. It has to be short and to the point. Ideally fit on a small card. Complete it in less than a minute. Keep the basics first. And this is probably the key item above all else. Have it written by the user, not by somebody that doesn't do the job on the day-to-day or week-to-week basis. 5 to 9 points is ideal. Keep them on one page. Keep it big font so you're not squinting your eyes. Make it practical to do. So a good versus bad checklist is a good one is precise. It covers all the necessary details in the fewest number of words. Easy to use, so that there's, and the opposite is that it's not vague. It cannot be vague, or things cannot be really assumed. And so there needs to be clarity when they're written to be able to do this. They need to be practical. We can't ask people to be accomplishing things that just simply cannot get done with where they're at in the day or with their job. This is a big one. It's not a comprehensive how-to guide. The checklist, and the book makes this a very clear point, the checklist is not designed to train the person right then and there how to do their job. It's almost like my airplane checklist. I don't have to relearn how to fly and prepare a plane every time I do the checklist. The checklist is there to trigger my mind and to give me, oh yeah, that detail, right. Oh yeah, that detail, right. So that it can be consistent and accurate. And yeah, with a bad checklist, I have to hammer it home. It cannot be made by a desk jockey. Someone who doesn't do the job simply cannot make the checklist and expect it to be used long-term and effectively. Here's where I've used checklists in some of my practice, I guess. On the one hand is when I send my assistant out to farms, I know that after we've filled out each of these details, that we have everything in place for my assistant to have a successful visit that brings value to the customer and gets done what we need to do. On the right, this is for whenever I cut open a pig. I have a reminder of all the different tissues, and it's not technically a checklist, I would say, but it gets done, the jogging of all the important details so that they don't get missed, type of thing. So that's just two examples where I've used them in my own practice. But in the barn, this is probably the most important part. Where can we use checklists that maybe we wouldn't think about? And this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch. Sow herd, daily checks, just to have a routine short check when the staff member walks out of the gestation barn or the breeder barn. 3 or 4 things. I've checked this, and this. Boom. That's all that it needs to be. And it helps build in that consistency. That could mean, for example, a checklist that's pinned to the door as the staff member walks back for coffee. And it's just a 30-second pause point, this, and this. And if anything's missed, I'll get it after coffee. And that's the first thing. For farrowing day preparation, having all the supplies there to manage the high-risk sows that give us stillbirths, or if you need to assist sows or what have you. Farrowing day checks. Again, similar thing to the sow herd. Just, okay, I've checked off this, and this. And that covers, I am confident that will cover the major things. Washing and room prep. This applies for the nursery as well. Huge value, and I would say opportunity for most of our producers to make sure that their operation, or their rooms, I guess, in different stages, are ready for the next groups of pigs. I guess, yeah, we could have a checklist. So everything's the same for nursery, grow, finish. As other areas, you can add in, ventilation or other environmental type of checklists that you can go through. For gilt developer or quarantine barns, you can have checklists for the selection process. For acclimation, there's quite a few details. That is a complex process again. And biosecurity. Biosecurity is one of those things that is always inconvenient, and yet it needs to be done. But the little details, some little details can get missed. And so there's application there too. Just as kind of a quick example, this would be a room preparation in the nursery. And this would be, as I anticipate it, or where it be useful, is right on the door of the room, or close by at least, when the pigs are weaning in. It's washed, disinfected, dried. Okay, it's no organic material is visible. Good. The ventilation is set, or the room or the program controller, I should say, is set to day 0. The air is hot. The water nipples are at the right height and have flow. There's no disinfect residue in the feeders. And the feeders have fresh and the right feed. And now I need to get after myself here, because I need to include the amount, to be perfectly precise, that should be in each of the feeders. But there's an example, and it's not exhaustive. But you know what? If this was done every week, I can almost guarantee you we would see improvements in mortality and treatment rates in the nursery, and likely weights coming out. Just like that 5-point for the central line infections study that they did, 30% of the time, something was missed out of that checklist. And I would love to know how often something like a 7-point for room prep, something would be missed. One more, which actually does have some value here. This is from Dr. Chris Rademacher from, I think he's Iowa State. He presented down at IPBS in 2022. And the topic was about rising sow mortality and targeting sow treatment better. They had, it was a rough form of a checklist. Basically, they said, feed at this time of day. There would be 2 people that feed together. And the person at the back marks any sow that doesn't get up. And then the last thing is to treat those sows that didn't get up later in the morning. That simple procedure, I should really call it, but it's in the form almost of a checklist to be done every day. They reduced sow mortality by 4.25%. That's a big deal. For this system, Dr. Rademacher suggested that was about $240,000 a year in reduced sow mortality. Incredible. So there's no question that there is application to getting it consistent, getting it right every time. I think that's about it, and I hope I haven't gone over time. Okay, I'm at about a half hour. So I guess, yeah, for questions, if you have any, feel free to put them in the question bar there.
Great, Cordell. So I guess we have one comment, just someone made a comment about it, that your topic reminds them of pig flow. Maybe expand a little bit about what pig flow is and how that would kind of align with what your presentation on checklist is.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, pig flow is well, relatively new to Canada program that is built with the I guess the producer that handles the pigs in mind. And the whole idea is actually very similar in terms of prioritizing high-risk sows at farrowing and organizing how the staff would flow through the barn. I guess that the program also goes into breeding and monitoring repeat rates so that that information is right close at hand. It's the whole, I guess the value proposition of pig flow is to have the important data in your hand when you need it, not a month later when you're doing your records. I guess, yeah, that's probably not a great not a great description of pig flow for considering all of its capabilities, but there are definitely some aspects that have of that program that have kind of built on that checklist model or getting the simple things right consistently. And I think to date, there's about 400,000 sows using the app or using the program. And in some cases, they've reduced stillbirths, for example, nearly by half. I think I'm recalling that correctly. Hey, Kurt?
Yeah, multiple percent anyways. Even for farms that have really good stillborn rates, they can, just by having, checklist or knowing what sows to identify and not forgetting about stuff because of that kind of checklist mentality. Yeah. Okay, great. And then another comment that someone has was flushing water lines in the nursery to be on that checklist as well.
Absolutely. Yes. If I jump back, you're right. It should be here. Let me see if I can jump back on my presentation, but yeah, I guess I can't. But yeah, I did a quick 7-pointer on that one, flushing those lines. And this is a great discussion point, actually. Will it get done? If we put it on the checklist, will it get done? Because now we need to look at, okay, if we've got this point on the checklist, we need to look at every step that needs to be done in order to have that accomplished. And then we need to look at all the barriers to it getting done and make sure, and I mean, I don't want to come off sounding like it shouldn't be on the checklist. This should be probably the first thing on the checklist because it's so important. But we need to have in the background, okay, all the steps actually to make sure that it's done every time and quickly and easily. There needs to be setup in the rooms, or there needs to be some kind of system available for the people doing the checklist to do that so that it'll get done when it's on the checklist. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks. We'll get, if there's more questions for Cordell that you come up with during the next presentation, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and he'll answer a couple more at the end. But right now, I guess it's just another reminder of that we'll have another presentation here from Cristina Sabau. So I'll tell you a little bit about her. So Cristina has a degree in animal science, and her very first job was in a pig farm, a 10,000 sow farm. So ever since, he has only been working in the swine industry, hands-on in farm and off farm as well. Her career started in Romania with one of the world's largest integrators, then moved to North Carolina in the USA, and then in Ontario and Manitoba. And she likes to say she gets what she calls itchy feet. So last year, in July, Cristina started working with PremierSHP, and she feels it's truly amazing how much she can learn given the opportunity to visit different farms almost on a daily basis. And I agree with her. I find that's a huge asset that we have as vets and vet teams, is to be able to steal other great ideas from producers and share them with others. And then graphic design was always a hobby of hers, but she wanted to learn more. So in 2016, Cristina pursued and earned her diploma in graphic design from the Center of Distance Education in Nova Scotia. So she's going to kind of take a little bit of graphic design and apply that to our swine production. And so with that, I'll invite Cristina to talk on her presentation called "What Graphic Design Taught Me About Pig Farming." Go ahead, Cristina.
Thank you for the presentation. I always hate doing that. I'm not very good at selling myself. So that's another reason why I kind of choose to study graphic design. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that during my presentation. Now I'm going to try to share my screen. Okay. Okay, so Kurt started my presentation very well, but I want to give you a little bit of background why I chose to study graphic design. And I'm going to tell you from the start, because the title, it's a little bit deceiving, because I'm going to continue. Actually, it was great that Cordell was able to present before me, because I'm gonna take what he said about checklists and making sure we make something simple enough that people actually follow those written rules, and apply it even more. How we can apply it even more into the barn. So now back to the graphic design. Well, it was a hobby. Started as a hobby, and because I was losing nights in a row. That's how much I love doing this. I said, okay, I want to learn more. So I went to graphic design school. And another reason why, because I'm generally an introverted, I'm shy, I'm a terrible public speaking, and you're going to see that during my presentation. And I'm also a terrible salesperson. So I wanted to learn more about that. And contrary to what people think about when they think about graphic design, and they think just about beautiful layouts and a beautiful ad and a beautiful poster and art, it's probably more the art of selling, because just like pig farming, graphic design has a purpose. If not, it's not graphic design. It's just a beautiful something. But graphic design has the purpose to sell or to make something practical. So that's why I wanted to pursue graphic design. And I never intended to actually work in this field. I actually ended up working a little bit in the field, but yeah, I just wanted to give you a background. And another comparison between graphic design and graphic design art, and then pig farming is, like I said, graphic design is not art, but it needs art to give you, to make our message stronger and give that wow effect. And it's the same with pig farming. Pig farming, it's not the same as a research or a trial into a new product or into a feeding strategy. Pig farming has to be also practical. So pig farming can learn from research and science, but it has to, each barn and each organization has to adapt that into their own operation to actually make it practical and profitable. So when I first started graphic design, this is another reason why I wanted to go, to learn new effects, to learn cool stuff, or at least, do something like this or something like this. I always had a little bit of a passion of learning more about how to wrap cars, but I ended up, and I believed I'm going to do a lot of this, like drawing, just having fun. It wasn't quite like that. I started with learning about squares and circles and drawing a straight line. And it was endless hours in which I just learned about the fundamentals of graphic design, history of graphic design. We even had classes of writing skills. So yeah, I will say it was a little bit not what I expected, and it was quite boring at some times. So I ended up, instead of doing this, most of the time I was doing this. A lot of cases to study and what other designers did, and a lot of material to read. So I was getting pretty exhausted. But just later, I realized that all that practice and learning the basics very well, and only after I mastered these basics, I ended up doing my own work. And this is actually my personal car wrap that I did, but it took me a while to get here. And just only after I started to do this kind of work, I realized how practical it came to learn the very basics of graphic design and the fundamental laws of graphic design. So I had to take 3 steps to summarize it. I had to master the basics, I had to improve, and I had to improve every day. And how I did improve, I had to leave for me a white space, a space that it was just for brainstorming and relaxing my brain. And then I had to learn to innovate, not to just copy paste other people, but to take their work, study their work, and then create something of my own. If not, and if you don't master the basics, you're always going to find yourself just sliding back down, and never getting to your purpose, your goal or your target. And I think it's the same in pig farming. So how do we master the basics in pigs farming? But before we actually master the basics in pig farming, we need to know what are the basics in pig farming. And the first one, and probably I'm not sure if it's the most important, but it's animal care, right? We need to provide proper environment. We need to have the basic knowledge and to provide basic nutrition requirements, and we need to take care of their health. And this is also connected to farm care, because if we have a farm that it's just crumbling and it's not taken care of, we're not going to have the proper environment for those animals to perform. So it's farm care environment. We need to work with a clean and organized workspace, and we need to always have a budget for repairs. But all this, we need another element that keeps all this together, and that is the most important element, and that's people care. So, and people care, why do I refer when I say people care? We need to start educating and inspiring people rather than just training them. Because I think training is something that they can learn, but that will not change their behavior. They will not understand how important it is to take care of those animals just by knowing the steps. And we need to provide to them clear expectations and always have a two-way communications. Because if people are afraid to talk, then it's going to be a rupture somewhere, and we will be very inefficient as an organization. So for me, these are the fundamental laws of pig farming. I'm sorry, my slide is okay. So next, it's how to master the basics in pig farming. Develop an SOP that makes sense. SOP, and for who doesn't know what an SOP means, is standard operating procedure. I myself, when I first started working in pig farming, this was my first because I was in the manager trainee program, I had to learn those SOPs very well because I was being evaluated on them. And I ended up hating those SOPs. And I hated them until not long ago. I never understood their purpose, and I felt like they're doing more bad than good. But then when I had my own farm and I started to work with different producers, I realized that actually are necessary. SOPs are necessary in pig farming to for us to be consistent and do a great job every day. But we need to rethink how we do these SOPs. We need to set up people for success when we do them, and it has to provide education first and then training. So we need to have them. Do you see my screen? Because I see myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So it has to be easy to read and follow. It has to. I recommend to include images on charts, and then maybe we want to make it in different languages, and we have to make it smart. And we're going to talk about that in a different slide. And we also need consistency. What that means, we need to keep that SOP alive and thriving. Just by writing an SOP today, and doesn't matter if it's perfect today, I guarantee you in a half a year from now, not later, it's not going to be perfect anymore. And it's just going to end up staying on the shelf and collect dust. So we need to feed and nurture it and get everyone involved. And when I say everyone involved, we need to get like management, higher management, ownership, is that the case. We need to get involved our veterinarians, our nutritionists, and definitely we need to get involved people that are doing the task. Just like Cordell said earlier, they need to be the ones that make those checklists. And for that, we need regular meetings for SOP reviews. And I will go as far as having at least, we don't have to have long meetings. We can have a 30-minute a meeting every Monday and just summarize one block of that SOP, one small block, one small section of that SOP, and just continuously talk to people and see what we need to add or take out or change in that SOP. And this to work together. So it's a continuous cycle where we need to develop that SOP in order to make sense. So if we look at the definition of SOP, it's a set of written instructions that describe the step-by-step process that must be taken to properly perform a routine activity. SOPs should be followed the exact same time every time to guarantee that an organization remains consistent and in compliance with industry regulations and business standards. And it's very true. Though this definition is kind of boring for somebody that works day-to-day in the barn, it's true. But I highlighted that SOP should be followed the exact same day every time, the same way every time. And I agree with this, but also because I worked so many years in the barn, from that point of view, I can tell you that doesn't happen, and it's almost impossible to happen. And why it's impossible? Because of this. SOPs, and I'm going to give you now a practical example that everybody loves. Moving sows. You read an SOP and everything is like a walk in the park. Easy breezy, you keep your calm, they're just going to go straight, and everything it's with happy ending. But in reality, it's not like that. You're going to have one stubborn. You're going to have one that will turn around and will scare the other ones. And then you're going to have the 5 sows coming back, and they're going to go over and jump over the crate and destroy a few crates that you're going to have to fix for the next 6 hours that day. So yeah, the reality, the SOP doesn't always say the reality that we have to confront with every day in the farm. So that's why we need to build a smart SOP. And the smart SOP building blocks it needs to be specific. What that means is why, what, where, who, when, how, and most SOPs are very good at that. So provide a clear picture and hold people accountable. And then it has to be measurable. How will I assess my achievement? And here I'm going to give the example of, let's say you started to implement post-cervical artificial insemination in your barn. how will that technician know that he did a good job in that moment when he inseminating, not a month later when they do the pregnancy check, in that moment? So these are things that maybe we want to, like a quality control measure, are things that we want to include in that SOP and discuss as a team and see what and then I get to the next part. It's measurable. It has to be measurable. We need to identify what can go wrong. We need to identify the requirements and constraints, and then it has to be attainable. Oh, sorry about that. With the tools that I have right now, can I reach my goal? If not, what do I need? Again, one can go wrong. And then it has to be realistic. Can I actually met the set goals? Is there anything I can do to make it so? Because if it's not, and people need to know, need to feel it, and need to understand, they need to believe that it's realistic, because otherwise they will probably end up, taking shortcuts. So it also has to be timely. What's the time that I need to meet this goal or this process? Because otherwise, again, and I'm going to give you here an example with washing rooms. There is a great variance on the timeline that it takes a technician to wash room. I go to some farms and I hear about washing a room for 8 hours. And then I go in another farm and they're done in 2 hours. Both rooms are clean. It's just, if they don't have that in their SOP, if they don't have that, that conversation is never happened. How would they know? Maybe they are afraid it's going to be dirty. So they're going to spend all day long in there to make sure it's really, really clean. And here I'm going to give you an example. And I hope you, oh, sorry. I'm not sure if you see it. So this is an example of SOP. As I introduced some images. I consider it to be smart. It's very specific. It tells us what can go wrong. It has some quality control sections. But what is the problem with SOP? With this SOP, it's very long. So now I will go back to my presentation. So it's very long. So then, yeah, you can revise it and you can read it and people will learn it, but slowly some bad habits are going to creep up here and there, and they're going to forget. And then I get back to what Cordell was mentioning, checklist. So instead of asking staff to read those SOPs regularly, which they will probably not do, we can implement short checklist. Let's say we can have this checklist on our semen fridge or somewhere near where, if you have like a special area in the barn where every time the insemination happens, you can put it there as a poster so they can know what is not negotiable, what they need, their checklist that they need to have it done every single time when they inseminate. And you would say, oh, an experienced breeder will never forget. And then I go to my next slide, and actually I switch up the slides. Sorry. I'm going to go back. I'm missing a slide. Sorry about that. I forgot my idea. Because I was missing my slide, but the idea is that they need to, an experienced technician can also forget very simple procedures in their because being busy every day. So now I want to jump back to the roundtable meeting, and what the roundtable is King Arthur's famed table in the Arthurian legend, and around which he and his knights were discussing problems. And as its name suggests, it has no head, implying that everybody is equal and has equal status. These roundtable meetings and plan sharing are very important to ship safety to each person, and to avoid tasks that may not be realistic, like I said earlier. And these meetings are very important and should not be canceled just because we are too busy, because that's what we hear all the time. We are too busy with doing our day-to-day work in the barn, so we don't have time for meetings. This is just, you know, lost time. But it's not, because staff can come with a brainstorming idea. You know, the ownership it's more interested in, and if he can say if we have the cash flow or not right now. The nutritionist can show us new pathways and new research, or your vet can also come with new ideas and tell you if something might impact or not, or improve your herd health. So they're very important. So we want to set up meetings at a regular interval. We want to involve everyone. We want to announce the agenda at the outset. We want to set a very relaxed atmosphere so we can encourage participation. And we want to listen. First of all, we want to listen rather than hope to be listened. So how does it look like to master the basics in pig farming? If you do these things, I think you already mastered the basics, and then you are good to go to the next step. You can easily integrate new employees. And in your culture as well, you have consistency with very few errors. So you can always, if you want to try something new, you can always go back with very few repercussions. You have unrestricted two-way communications. Staff is inspired and they're not afraid to come with new ideas. Leader overtime is necessary to properly complete a task, and that's the task for animal and farm care. And there is some white space left, and that white space is the time in your day that is open and available. It's not crowded and chaotic, and it's time for thinking, for creating, for relaxing. And before I go to the next level, I just want to remind everybody that an SOP, so procedure, is not an all-in, all-out solution. They don't guarantee our success, and definitely they don't guarantee excellent performance, but do ensure that we have a structured quality system and processes in place. We have qualified employees, and we create through this an inspiring culture. So I think an SOP in their purest form just support the right people in the right environment. So have you ever struggled to solve a problem or remember a name or where you put your car keys? I know I always do that. And you think about it all day long and it just doesn't come to you. And then suddenly you're taking a shower or you wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning and you suddenly know the answer. So why does that happen? It's because your mind is relaxed. It continues to work on the problem for you without the normal interruptions during the day. So only when it can relax, it will dig up that answer that you were looking for. So imagine if that can happen, even if every day when you're awake. In graphic design, we also treat white space as critical. Is it important? And it's also hard to, when you meet with some clients, they don't understand why you cannot use every inch of that page or every inch of that wall when you design something, and why you need so much white space, and they consider it's just a waste of space. And that happens in farming too. People think that isn't taking breaks and schedule time to do nothing just very inefficient. We should have, occupied every minute of the day. But no, you don't need to be productive every minute of every day. Being busy doesn't necessarily mean that you're being productive. You're just being busy. And we need space to be creative. We need space to see clarity. And here I put a quote that you probably struggled to read because the background is so busy. and you're starting to have headaches and you feel dizzy. Now this makes it a lot better. So when we have white space, then we are less blind to the wrong practices that we can creep out day by day. And this is an example. This is an older study by Flores. It's a 1996 study. The effect of number of sow artificial insemination in the same day by a technician on farrowing rate. So we see that the first 20 sows always have, doesn't matter what technician was that, the first 20 sows, so the first half of the sow always have a better farrowing rate than the next 20 sows. This is because they get tired or they get bored, they get hungry. So those little tasks that they know start to lose some of the quality. So this is actually a fact. So that's why we do need breaks in order to be performant. And now, because we have the space, we consider, okay, so I mastered the basics, I have the space, I found this new trial that I want to try. I was struggling with stillborns for a while now, so I want to give something a try. So I see this and it looks amazing on paper. This farm, this is a demonstration project showing the change in stillborn percentage by feeding 4 times per day versus 1 time a day. Ron Ketchum, everybody knows him, was involved in this. And it looks amazing on paper. This farm dropped from almost 9% stillborn rate to initially 4 and then under 3%. So it's a dream come true. So you want to give this a try. So there are some steps that you need to take. First, you make sure now you mastered the basics. So that's why you give it a try. You see the target, you see your goal. Okay, I want to improve my stillborn rate. So you look for balance. That's your next step. It's now a good moment. Do I have the cash flow? Do I have the cash flow? Is it risky? Do I lose anything by trying this? And you decide, yeah, in this case, everything is okay. So I will give something a try. And then after we tried it, we're going to measure it. Did it give me the same results? Is it practical and doable on the long run? So let's say it gave me some results. I had my stillborn rate at 9% and now it's 6%. So I'm happy. But is it practical? Are technicians willing to do this on the long run? Is there anything else I need to do? The return on investment in this case is not really applicable, but in some other instances might be. So then we decide, if I don't like it and I don't see any result, I just reset and go back to my basics and I forget about this trial. If I like it just the way it is, then again, I have to move it a level lower so I can start mastering it. So I make sure that everybody makes it a habit in their day-to-day work. Or I can innovate it. I can move it a step higher and try to make it my own. Let's say the way the study is 4 times a day doesn't really work for me. So then I will try something else. I will try to make it 2 times a day or 3 times a day because that works better for me. And then again, measure it and decide what to do with that. So always remember that experience is everything. The theory is just secondary. So you give something a try and then you decide if you move it in your basics and you master it to make sure it's here to stay, or you move it a level higher and you innovate it, you make it your own, you change something to make it your own. And we were talking about pig flow. This is another example of give something a try. In this instance, for Hort family farms, pig flow, and I'm going to read his comment. Pig flow has given us increased accountability and improved communication with and in our sow farms. This technology has helped make everyone better, and as a result, we have seen a noticeable increase in production. So in this case, they didn't have to innovate it; they just had to move it to their basic level and try to make it, everyone accept it and embrace it and make it work for them. And apparently in this case, it did work for them. So next, I will talk a little about I will talk about innovation, but first I want to draw the attention to 2 traps that we can fall in when it comes to giving something new a try. And trap number 1 is, no, thank you, we got this, we are too busy to try anything. We are constantly, when we are constantly not open for suggestion, is probably because we don't master the basics. And we want to take a pause and just reset, and then reset. This should be always something to, there should always be something to improve. Not necessarily a new product, but maybe making a process faster or easier with less sweat to implement. And why do we need to improve all the time in pig farming? Because of sharks. Yeah, you heard me correctly. It's because of sharks. Sharks, I compare pig farmers with the great white sharks. These sharks rely on obligated ram ventilation, a way of breeding that requires sharks to swim with their mouths open. If they stop swimming, they cannot have the oxygen they need, so they die. Sounds familiar? So that's what happens in pig farming. We always have to improve to keep up with the times. And trap number 2, try everything. You're very excited. You're the type of person that is very excited. So you want to try everything, everywhere, all at once. This is on the opposite end of the trap number 1. And why is not advisable? Because change is hard. Even one change, creates pressure for the people that have to implement this change, because no one likes to fail. We all want to be in a team that it's in a winning wheel. So change comes with unpredictable results. And also because it is very hard to keep track on multiple changes at once. If you don't record, how will you know what worked and what not? So I do believe multitasking is a myth, and there is a lot of research onto it that if we do a simple task like working on a presentation on the computer, and I stop to check an email for a second, then it will take me another 15 minutes for my brain to regroup and start working on my presentation. So multitasking, it's not something that we should ask people to do, because it's not efficient. And then we got to innovation. And as Edmund Goodman said, profitable and successful innovations do not have to be exaggerated or make headlines. They just need to solve problems. And I'm going to give you some examples, some practical examples of innovation in pig farming. And I'm going to read through some of it because it's a long list, but I'm going to give you a very simple one: heat checking bores. When I went to a farm very recently, a few months ago, and I realized that quantity can trump quality. In every book, or if you look at on Google, every book recommends to have for heat checking that adult stinky bore. These guys in this farm were not very comfortable with having an old boar, so they were using 5 or 6, I forgot exact the number, but teenagers boar. Basically they were all under 1 year old for heat checking and inseminating sows. They were inseminating sows regularly, not with PCI. When I saw and I participated at that breeding session, and it was amazing. I was amazed by the work team. They were just releasing those teenagers boars that they were living together in the same pen, so they knew each other. They put them on the alley all together, and the frenzy began. Like, sows were standing frozen. These little boars were so active and jumping on one another, not fighting, just playing. And the sows just took that semen in like nothing. It was amazing. It was the best breeding session that I was able to witness so far. Or we can have something like a new product, right? Swine flow, the swine flow testimonial that I read before, or we can have a better, healthier pork through unique feed strategy. And I'm going to give you here the example of Creta Farm. It's a Greece pork producer that has formulated a special diet for its pigs and includes extra virgin oil and certain herbs and citrus fruits. And that's how they market their pigs, and that's how they differentiate themselves from the rest of the products on the market. Or find your niche. And I'm going to give you here as an example the Neiman Ranch in the States, right? It's a network of more than 740 family farmers and ranchers in the US that market themselves by saying that they raise their livestock humanely and sustainable. They don't use any antibiotics, but they're not organic. So by refusing to get that organic certification, they were able to keep their prices very similar to the commercial product. There is always a way forward. This is an inspiring story from family farmers, Martin and Teresa Van Rey. It was published in Pig Progress a while ago. I think it was 2019. On the point of giving up, they managed to become profitable by selling pork directly to the public. So they started to work with a small packer in their area, and that's how they managed to first float and then become more profitable. And then the last one, going back to the roots of pig farming, Ioan Tărtărean, it's a Romanian farmer and the founder of Toto Traditional Meat Brands, built his business by betting on Mangalitsa pig and another traditional breed, but I forgot the name. And while everybody else followed the trend to produce the highly productive lean breeds, he went rustic with the very fat Mangalitsa and won the bet that he made. So innovation can come in many different shapes and forms, and it can come from within, or it can come from outside and just have that eureka moment. And just to summarize, and it wasn't by chance that I started from the lower. I'm gonna make you read from bottom to top, because that's where we need to start. So we need to develop an SOP that makes sense. We need to be consistent, look for balance. We need to measure everything that we try to implement, and then we can decide if we gonna innovate it or master it. And I'm gonna close the presentation with a quote from Bonnie Blair. Bonnie Blair, it's a retired American skater, and she's one of the top skaters of her area. And winning doesn't always mean being first. Winning just means you're doing better than you've done before. And here's where I'm gonna close my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Cristina. That was excellent. We're almost out of time, but a couple of comments that I heard from a couple of participants. I guess if there are any more questions, please, for Cordell or Cristina, please jump in the Q&A box right now. Now's your chance. But a couple of comments I heard were that one participant definitely agreed with your SOP message, and that was kind of while you were talking about the SOP versus reality and your kind of smart SOPs. Another one said they appreciate that you implemented your graphic design training on your presentation and your slides. So they definitely see that. Maybe one quick question that I have, maybe for both of you, is how do you take all that in, which you just said on theory, right? And how do you now bring that into reality on a farm level on a day-to-day basis? Kind of because I see myself making SOPs with producers often, and how do we help producers, or how do producers help themselves to kind of implement what we just learned? Maybe Cordell, for just really quick, both of you. Yeah.
Sure. I think in the fewest number of words is to explore what goes into the SOP that we're going to write, or the checklist that we're going to make. Explore the resources, explore the people, explore the process of each point. And in the case of checklists, think creatively then. Every situation is different as to how to minimize the effort, how to minimize the complexity of each of those things getting done. I think that's it really goes beyond, it goes beyond just get this done. It goes into, okay, in order to do this, I need to do this, and I need to have that all in order ahead of time, type of thing. Does that, I think that's what I would say.
Okay, yeah, great. What about Cristina?
I'll outline the idea of having regular meetings. Maybe we cannot always afford to involve everybody, like your veterinarian and your nutritionist, but staff meetings, and it has to be somewhere from the higher management, and then the people that are doing the task every day. I think these are more important because I was kind of trying to do my my own study and see what's the big difference between farms that are excellent, that have excellent results, and then farms that are okay. And what I see the biggest difference is the culture, the way the technicians work with each other and talk with each other. They try to work as a team. There is a little bit of competition. Actually, there is a lot of competition between them. But and this kind of meetings, I think that can bring all kinds of people together and just let them share their ideas without something that I experienced, I was just at the beginning of my career, but I was having ideas, right? And then it sometimes it's enough for the manager to just shame you once and tell you, hey, that's a silly idea, and then that turns you off. So you're not going to come with another idea again. And yeah, maybe it's silly, but maybe that idea can turn the light to another technician that comes with a better idea, and so on. So another thing from graphic design, brainstorming is the most important process in making something happening.
Excellent. And I think my comment would be, I don't think there are many bad farms left. I think they're all good, but I think the difference between good and great, which is to me is consistency. And to have consistency, everybody can have a good week or a good month, but to have that high level consistent performance over months and years, it's about just implementing these checklists and following SOPs and adapting and changing and innovating and all those things on a consistent basis. So with that, I'll just kind of look about the closing comments. Thanks again to our featured sponsors, Giga and Zoetis. We really appreciate it. Also, thank you to all of our sponsors throughout the year and throughout all the presentations. Wouldn't be able to do this without you. A couple of the door prizes, we will have door prizes, and they will be drawn at the beginning of next week. And the winners will be announced on our Facebook discussion group channel and contacted by email as well. You can also join the Facebook discussion group on Pig Channel, which up till now already has 613 members. So you can discuss things with other members of our team or with other producers, and also kind of be notified of the different webinars available. This webinar was recorded, so you can access it on pigchannel.com next week. And the next webinar will be in French and is presented by Nutrition Athena and Demeter, and will be held on September 15th. All the details and registration links will be on our pigchannel.com. So thank you again, everybody, for bearing with us. We're a little over time, but thanks so much and have a fantastic weekend. Take care.
Thanks.